Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the new home of power mining analysis. In today's episode, Anthony Power and I are unfortunately going to be covering the absolute bloodbath we're seeing in the equities market, really across the board, but specifically Bitcoin and the Bitcoin mining companies taking a hit this morning. Fortunately, they've bounced back quite nicely off the lows we saw this morning, but still a lot of carnage in the streets. Could be a great buying opportunity if you've got that long-term conviction. Now, in addition to that, we've got a number of key production updates for the month of July from the top miners in the sector. So we're going to be covering all of that and more in today's video. Before we do though, please take a second, smash the like button, you guys. Big help to myself and the channel, especially helps get this content to other people like you who may find value. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below, how is your portfolio holding up today? Which of the miners are you adding to? And what is your outlook in terms of the bottom here for Bitcoin in the immediate future? Now, with that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay, guys, so that's right. Unfortunately, today we are in the midst of a correction in the markets, equities, and Bitcoin sector. Anthony, a free fall for Bitcoin and Ethereum overnight. Ethereum down in excess of 22%, Bitcoin in excess of double digits. I've got a couple visuals I was looking at overnight here. You can just see the free fall in terms of event notifications coming up on people's phones and how quickly the sentiment can change. Only a few short months ago, we were so excited about HPC AI. If you take a look at this post, you guys, Japan's stock market officially in correction territory. So Japan was trading last night before the North American markets were open. Really a free fall for that entire indice. We've now got Bitcoin and Ethereum again down double-digit percentages, with Ethereum essentially doubling the declines we've seen in Bitcoin. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on Bit Digital in a second here, Anthony. In addition to that, we've got the 10-year note down 60 basis points. The 10-year and the 2-year have actually flipped each other. So a lot of really weird things we're seeing in the economic spectrum right now this morning. Anthony, how are you feeling in terms of your portfolio, in terms of the market, and Bitcoin price now breaking below $50,000 US?
You know, it wasn't a great 24 hours, and you're right. A lot of this has caused with the markets in Japan, and effectively over there, what you've got is you've got the traders in Japan. They've been borrowing the yen at low interest rates, converting it into USD, buying US stocks, and effectively Japan have now raising the interest rates, and therefore they've strengthened the yen against the dollar. And these traders now, who bought into the US stocks, they've got to pay higher interest for what they've borrowed, and they're facing literally huge forex losses as well. So the US assets they've got may not be enough to repay what they've borrowed. So that's caused a real issue there. And so therefore, as these traders are unwinding their positions, they're getting big losses and margin calls, having to settle their US stocks to raise the USD required and then convert that back into the yen, which is obviously appreciated, and to try and pay back the loans they took out in the first place. So this in effect has now created in the US more selling pressure. And so, and that's just one factor. You've also got the fact that globally we're seeing, we've still got the war in Ukraine, we've still got the war in the Middle East, which tensions are getting higher. In the UK, we've got riots on the streets. So all this, macroeconomic and news, it's causing a problem, and Bitcoin felt the brunt of it yesterday. But we have started to see some signs of a bit of recovery. So Bitcoin's back up above, I think, the 54,000 level, and Ethereum's started to recover as well. But that was a big drop in Ethereum yesterday. Not really expecting that the levels of 20%. We talked about Bitcoin volatility generally be sort of around the 3% mark. So anything that's like double digits, it's a case of like, Houston, we've got a bit of a problem here. And so, you know, when you see Ethereum at 20%, and Ethereum really much tracks, you know, Bitcoin in terms of, price action, you know, they're very much correlated. The two biggest coins, you know, if we put the coins into a pie, you know, half the pie is Bitcoin, another 17% of the pie is Ethereum, and then 33% left over, that's all the shit stuff, like, you know, so that's your 13,000 other coins. So when you see those two big coins go down there, you can effectively say the rest of the pie was also shrinking considerably. So it's a smaller pie now, but we are seeing a little bit of recovery this morning. And so, yeah, hopefully that will, you know, help some of the mining stocks, because the mining stocks opened again when the Japanese markets opened, and I saw the, you know, really, you know, mega fall in terms of mining stocks were hitting 20%. In fact, I think I saw an article this morning said that $3.5 billion was wiped off the mining stocks at market opening, pre-market.
Yeah,
And
I believe it.
bear in mind the mining stocks make up something in the region of probably like 25 billion, 22 to 25 billion. That's a significant amount.
My account, I got a screenshot first thing this morning. Anthony was down 25% at one point. Now it's pared back about 2/3 of those losses. I'm down around 8%. So actually down less today than yesterday, which is ironic. Now you talk about Japan's situation. That essentially is a margin call. That's exactly why you don't want to trade on margin, you guys. You never want to invest money you can't afford to lose. That was essentially happening on a national platform here, Anthony, and we saw the effects of a margin call. So interest rates, although they're calling for those to be reduced in Canada, just dropped theirs 1/4%. US, there's calls to reduce. Those can really impact long-term
GB
trade
closed
strategy.
theirs 1/4% last week as well, so we went down 1/4% like many of the big economic countries. So and I think there's probably grounds for further cuts. I mean, they were talking America, something like 0.75 this month, 0.75 next month, to try and stimulate the market. So that's like, you know, potentially 1.5% reduction. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that, you know, mortgage rates in the US were like 3%, and now they're probably, you know, 6 to 7%. So, you know, all this is having a real impact on just the ordinary consumer.
Yeah, it certainly is. Our mortgage is up for renewal. We're in just north of 2%, and we're looking around 5 or 6 now. So it definitely has a big impact. And we talked about this, Anthony, things like mortgage rates, it takes a while for that to flush through the system, for consumers to really feel the pain there of the increasing groceries, the inflation, the mortgage interest rates. And now it seems to all be kind of unspinning at once. Now, on the other side of the coin, we've got an election coming up this year. Obviously, any politician doesn't want to be dealing with a bear market during an election cycle. So we can only imagine the quantitative easing, the financial stimulus, the money printers are going to get fired up here in a big way, Anthony. And if you believe in the Bitcoin thesis here and the deflationary nature of Bitcoin, we obviously know that's a good thing for people holding Bitcoin or people like the miners producing Bitcoin. So fast forward now, Anthony, mid-morning, the miners have rebounded quite nicely. My portfolio is down around 6.5% now. As you said, Bitcoin is back up north of $54,000 US. So we are starting to see quite a bit of life come back into the market, 54,600. We've also had a number of really positive production results come out today for the month of July. So although on a macro scale, we're seeing some real headwinds here for the market, on a smaller scale, individual company basis, we're seeing some really positive trends in terms of both production and overall hash rate. Now, unfortunately for the miners, the two other wildcards here, Anthony, are difficulty and global hash rate. So let's talk about those quickly, then we'll transition into the individual miners.
Yeah, so we saw the difficulty last change on the 31st of July. It's now at an all-time high of 90.67 trillion. And if you think, you know, where we were back in, you know, in January, we're at probably, you know, 72 trillion at that point there. So probably probably 25% increase in difficulty just this year, and that impacts mining companies because their production's affected by that. It means that there's more hash rate on the network, and therefore there is more to be shared out in terms of rewards across more miners. So if you're not keeping up with the global hash rate, it means you're effectively losing share. In terms of the hash rate price, which is another way of looking at how much the miners receive, we talked I think last week about reaching all-time lows of about $44 per petahash per day for hash rate online. Well, yesterday with that Bitcoin price dropping, we saw the hash price drop as low as $35 per petahash per day. And if you think we had one miner who was saying that they were comfortably able to mine until it reached 29. That's not too far away from that, and that's I won't say it is, but it's one of the most efficient miners out there. So you can imagine some of the less efficient miners who that 35 might not be a significant amount of hash price to receive if you're mining at the moment and incurring significant costs above that.
Now, Anthony, just to jump in there, it was widely, I guess, estimated or forecasted that the global hash rate would fall off considerably after halving. I know we had talked about up to 20, 25, 30%. That was kind of the consensus from Wall Street. In actuality, that's just not the case. So can you walk us through kind of what's happened there? What changed with that thesis before halving versus what we're seeing in actuality now?
Yeah, so JP Morgan in January came out with a paper and said that once the halving would occur on the 19th, 20th of April, depending which time zone you were in, we'd see about 25% coming off the global hash rate. And actually what we saw it increase by a couple of percent. Now, bear in mind, in January, the Bitcoin price was $42,500 at the start of January, and sort of by April, we'd already seen Bitcoin price had reached, by the end of March, it reached 71,000 on the last day of March. So the Bitcoin price had rallied, probably more than JP Morgan had in their probably analysis. So Bitcoin price this year, apart from the last few days, has been sort of over 60,000 for most of the year and held that quite well. So the Bitcoin price has probably helped miners determine whether they're going to stay on the network. And we've had this discussion before, but looking at the fact now after halving, there's not much more than the rewards. As the transaction fee spiked a couple of times since April, but for not many days, 2 or 3 days, where miners benefited with significant transaction fees. But at the moment, probably between 5 and 10% transaction fees being given to miners. So you're really, $35, $36 a petahash. Maybe with transaction fees that gets to 40. It's not going to be much more than that, and that's low. I mean, prior to the halving, some of these miners were able to achieve $100, $110 per petahash per day. Go back to last year, and miners were achieving, I think, in the early part of 2023, it actually reached about $400 a day per petahash, and so that's come down 90%. So when your rewards have come down 90% and your costs effectively haven't changed, that's a big cost to, a big impact to the business. But we haven't seen, we've seen the hash rate, even in recent days, it's been above 800. The global hash rate's been above 800. It's still in that sort of band of between 600 and 700 exahash a day. Bear in mind, at the start of the year, it was probably, it starts the year, it's closer to like 400. So, we've seen that global hash rate increase, but it's not really reduced in the way that some analysts expected. Going forward, though, I mean, again, we unless people are plugging in and getting literally free energy, There has to be a point at which, miners get switched off, the less efficient miners. But we keep saying that, and we keep seeing the hash rate increase. So at the moment, it's forecast to drop by 2.8% in about 9 days' time. So that's still a long way to go. And so I wouldn't play too much emphasis on 2.8%. If we look at it each day and it keeps increasing, that might give you the impression then that, it'll come down further. It tends to be more volatile towards in the last sort of 24 hours. And then obviously you get the true prediction, the true number comes out as at the end of the 14 days.
Sure.
But at the moment, it's about 2.8%, showing 2.8% reduction at the next difficulty change, which isn't a big amount considering where it is.
Yeah, it's really interesting dynamics we're seeing. It keeps reminding me, Anthony, of the quote, the market can stay irrational a lot longer than you can stay liquid. And these dynamics, they just don't make sense from surface level. But obviously, like you say, Anthony, maybe people have extremely lucrative power contracts, or who knows the underworkings of this. But at some point, you do have to think, if Bitcoin price, hash price keeps going down, and global difficulty keeps going up, the equation doesn't work sooner rather than later. So with that being said, talking about what's working and what's not, we want to get into specific miner updates for the month of July. Really a flurry of operational updates. I would bet most of the companies putting these out didn't anticipate the massive Monday correction here, Anthony, when they put the press releases together. So first and foremost, Bitdeer. So we can go through these in a little bit more detail. Bitdeer came out with 181 Bitcoin mined for the month, so just shy of 200. They had operational hash rate of 21.4, I believe, Anthony, or 21.2, and 212,000 machines currently under management. Now, the story with Bitdeer, we actually talked to them at the event about this, is really the seal miner and how quickly they're building those out, and they're replacing or backfilling their own rigs in their data centers. So that's continuing to work through the system now. You've talked about some of the benefits, Anthony, of reducing that overall fleet efficiency, getting increased returns out of these machines, especially as the market economics are really stressed here for the miners. What is your take on Bitdeer and this fleet upgrade they're in the midst of?
Yeah, so they've talked about the seal miner, and they're going to deploy about 3.4 more exahash during Q4. So those will be going online in Texas and at their tidal facility in Norway. So the last quarter of this year, they'll add another 3.4 to their self-mining hash rate, bringing that total proprietary hash rate to just under 12, 11.8 exahash. And we'll get to see those new miners operating. Now, they've got a plan to increase the efficiency of those miners. So, at the moment, they're at 18 joules a terahash, which is pretty good for the first generation, going down to 14, going down to 10 by middle of next year. And then they've got an aspirational target of reaching 5 joules a terahash, which would really be game changing for Bitdeer if they can do that. We've seen Bitmain announce machines that are probably edging towards 10 as well, and some of the other suppliers now are looking at bringing in more efficient miners than are at the market at the moment. So it's a real sort of like race to see who can bring out the most efficient miner. But the great thing about Bitdeer is if they can produce these in-house, then they'll save on all those sort of production additional costs that miners pay. And if you can save on costs of mining machines, it means that you can use that money for that savings for other things there. So from a monthly perspective, and we look at the self-mining, so in total hash rate for all their proprietary hosting cloud hash rate, yes, at 21.2. But in terms of self-mining, they're at 7.5. Mined 181 Bitcoin. And so, in terms of, we always look at sort of like the metrics, what that's associated with. So again, it's mining 24.1 Bitcoin per exahash. And if we look at what Bitfarms and Hive, they're like the standard two best operators. they were producing 24.6, 24.7 respectively. So 24.1 is a great month for Bitdeer. They don't hodl, so they've sold they sell their Bitcoin as they mine it. So they've sold all 181. Their fleet efficiency at the moment is probably one of the lowest, or the lowest fleet efficiency at 32.5. So if you look at the likes of CleanSpark, who have a fleet efficiency of 22.89. You can say Bitdeer's is like, about 30% less efficient than CleanSpark. And what does that mean to miners? Well, if you've got 30% less efficient miners, it means you're paying more effectively to mine a Bitcoin. So you want to get that efficiency down as low as possible. And we've just articulated they're going to bring all these new miners in online. And as we see the next 12 months, there'll be more and more efficient miners coming to the table to get that cost down and put Bitdeer in a really positive position. One thing about them compared to others that separates them out, apart from the fact they're building their miners in-house, which is a great plus side, is the amount of energy available to them. So they operate at the moment at 895 megawatts, which is significant for a miner, but they've got contracted capacity of 2,540 megawatts, or 2.5 gigawatts in total of contracted capacity. And they're actually sort of building on a lot of those sites now. So you look at the likes of Ohio, Bhutan, Tidal in Norway, and another recent site in the US that they're sort of like now developing. So a lot of sites they're bringing online. This is not sites that are just like greenfield sites waiting to be utilized. They're actually growing these sites over the sort of next 12 months. So, we've talked about 11.8 exahash by the end of this year. Their target for next year sort of takes them into the group that has, Riot Platforms, Marathon Digital, and CleanSpark in terms of hash rate. They're looking to get over 40 next year. So next year, 2025, looks like it could be a really big year for Bitdeer. So yeah, a really good monthly update.
Yeah, it certainly was. Happy to see they're continuing to make progress with the fleet upgrades. Now, shifting gears over to Core Scientific, Anthony, you talk about fleet efficiency. So Core Scientific is one of the best in the industry right now, about 24.7 based on their July production update. In addition to that, we talk about hosting versus self-mining. They're showing just north of 25.3 total energized hash rate here, Anthony. About 20.1 of that is dedicated to self-mining. And as a reward for that, they came out with 411 in the month of July. Again, a very consistent month, right around the 13.3 Bitcoin per day. Anything stand out in this report for you?
Yeah, a couple of things. Quite rightly, one of the lowest or one of the best efficiency rates on the market. So, anything around that 24 mark there. Actually, in June, it was 24.1. So it sounds like they may be using some of their older miners. Adam said that they had a quite a significant amount of sort of like less efficient miners that could be used. If you underclock some of these miners, you might be able to get profit from them. So he might be actually putting that into practice and using some of those, because that's probably one of the reasons why the efficiency would drop by that amount from 24.1 to 24.7. But still, great efficiency. What it looks like now as well is they're starting to hodl. They haven't in their report updated how much they're hodling, but if you look at how much they mine 411. They also hosted Bitcoin for their customers of 110 Bitcoin, and they sold 401. So it depends on how much of the you could automatically say at least 10's been held in the treasury, because if they mined 411 and sold 401, then that leaves 10. But they also receive Bitcoin for the hosted service, and I don't quite know if they pay their customers in Bitcoin or they pay them in terms of revenue. So we can assume that they have got a hodl. And bear in mind, Adam said that once some of the caveats have been lifted in terms of debt on the balance sheet, and they certainly were able to exchange the first amount of debt. The notes were converted a few weeks ago into shares, so that reduced their debt considerably. That they would have more freedom to do what they wanted. So maybe they've reached the threshold for those caveats to be removed, and now they don't have to sell within 10 days all their Bitcoin mined. So they're still selling majority of it, but the numbers state that that they're keeping some back. So that's interesting to see. In terms of Bitcoin mined per exahash, they mined 20.4. So that again, compared to Hive and Bitfarms, a little bit lower than expected, maybe in that department there. But again, it's a case of they're in Texas, some of their sites, so maybe a little bit more curtailment than normal. Bear in mind, we are talking about the July updates. And one other thing I want to mention there, they continue to work on their site in Pecos, Texas, which is a 100-megawatt data center. And when that's completed, they're going to move miners into that data center to free up space in current sites, which are then going to be scheduled for conversion into their HPC hosting. So that should be happening imminently, because they start the refurbishment of their sites in Q4 this year, ready to start putting in GPUs on behalf of CoreWeave in that major contract they've got signed up there for 270 megawatts.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how they navigate that migration. That was my question at the Investor Day, Anthony, in the meeting there, was just how is that going to impact operations as you're unplugging, transporting, refurbishing, rekitting these machines. So we'll see how Core can navigate that. Now, interestingly enough, we have Wulf up next. So TeraWulf, they hit a major milestone this month, Anthony, now surpassing 10 exahash in terms of their operating hash rate. They've been aggressively plugging in, I think, over 10,000 now of the latest generation S21, S21 Pros at their facilities, and they're really starting to see a big shift or improvement in their overall hash rate. They came out with 195 Bitcoin mined in month. Curious to get your thoughts on TeraWulf right now.
Yeah, as you say, they've got very much close to 10 exahash of installed hash rate. They were operating at 8 exahash on average for the month of July, so still, about 25% to get to that, utilize that full installed hash rate. But if they're putting miners in to building 4 at Lake Mariner, then it'd be a case of we'd expect those to come online. So it should be interesting in August how much the average operational hash rate increases. So 8 was for July. We know they've got 10 installed now, so that should increase there. Mining efficiency, 24.6. So again, similar to where we are with the likes of Core Scientific, Marathon, probably slightly better than what Riot have got at the moment, although Riot haven't issued their efficiency in their monthly update. So we'll need to get Jason to maybe put that in the next update so we can see all these new miners into Corsican and how they're improving their efficiency. But yeah, TeraWulf have sort of like been one of the best performing stocks this year. They've grown hash rate consistently throughout the year as per the plan. And they're now looking at, moving into the HPC space, and they've got this 2 megawatt proof of concept project and a 16 megawatt building that they're going to use to demonstrate their high density computing capabilities. So everything going well for them. They're still operating part of their hash rate from the Nautilus site. So, and there's been speculation about that site there being bought out. So how that will impact TeraWulf there, but I'm sure Paul and the team at TeraWulf have got that under scrutiny there, and we'll consider maybe any offer to buy them out of their contract. But they have got significant length of contract there with extensions applicable as well. So that'll be an interesting development. So 195 Bitcoin mined. If we look at what that looks like from a comparison, Bitcoin mined per exahash, that's 24.4. So that's pretty much on the heels of the likes of Bitfarms. So again, a good month for TeraWulf. They don't hodl at the moment. So again, 195 Bitcoin sold in a month. And one interesting aspect, obviously, the amount of power that they have accessible now is now 245. So that's increased from previously 210. So power's going up. They have got access to to more power than that can come online over the next 18 months as they grow their business in terms of self-mining and through HPC.
Yeah, a really nice update from TeraWulf. Moving along here, Anthony, to Riot. I think I misspoke earlier. They came out with 370, so very close to Core Scientific, but have not surpassed them yet. They're continuing to turn on machines and buildings. And in this update, Anthony, what was really interesting for me from Riot Platforms is you've got some really nice satellite aerial images of the Corsicana facility. You can see buildings A1, A2. That was really the bulk of our tour while we were down there. That's one continuous structure, you guys, but there's an air gap or a centerpiece that doesn't actually have mining equipment in it. So A1, A2 are one long continuous building. You see B1 is, or the B building, about half completed now. So we're starting to see some major increases in terms of the infrastructure and the buildings at this Corsicana facility.
Yeah, it's less than 2 months since we were at Corsicana, but it was great to see more hash rate coming online. So if you look at June, they announced 22 exahash, but they only had just over 11 of operating hash rate. In July, that installed hash rate's now increased to 23.3, and that's predominantly because of the fact that Kentucky is, I think that's the block facility, which has got 1 exahash of deployed hash rate there, operating at 0.9. And so that facility there has helped increase. But if you look at the operating hash rate, that has gone up to 15.5. And so we had Jason on the podcast literally last week, and that was one of the things that we were hoping for, to get more hash rate online. Having installed it, we want to see that number grow. So when you have 22 installed and you're operating at 11, that's a massive gap. But they've got to 15.5, and they've even told you how they've done that. So if you look at the likes of Corsicana, which started operating during April, so it was at like 0 at the beginning of April, that's now at 5.7. So that's gained an extra 2.1 exahash just in the month of July. And that's a significant amount. That's effectively like nearly half of Hive Digital's hash rate. So it's a big amount there. In terms of in terms of the Rockdale facility, that was operating at 7.7 in June. Now that's gone up to 9.6, so another 1.9 there, and plus the 0.9 at the Kentucky facility. That means that their operational hash rate is up to 15.5, which is over 4 exahash more than they were operating in the month of June. So I think that deserves some sort of support for that good news coming through there. But they're still sort of shy of the 23 that they've got installed. So basically another 8 exahash to come online imminently. So I'm expecting August again to start delivering that. If we look in terms of power credits, now remember last year, during these warm months, so you've got June, July, August, September, these are the four months that some of the miners are based in Texas. They really benefit from curtailing energy, benefiting from selling power back to the grid. and also from being part of the 4CP, the ERCOT 4CP program. So, able to receive demand response credits and reductions in their transmission fees for future power costs. And in June itself, they achieved 5.2 million in total, but in July, that number is actually reduced to 3.4 million. And so when you look at what that looks like compared to, if you look at that as a Bitcoin equivalency, using the price of Bitcoin on the last day of July, that's like an extra 53 Bitcoin in terms of what they've got from switching off and getting power sales. So that figure then takes them above the Core Scientific monthly amount. And, Riot still have more hash rate to actually switch on in this next, 1 to 2 months. We should see that hash rate probably get close to 20 in the next update. And, by the end of the year, they've already raised their target from 31.5 to 36 exahash. So that's a significant amount. They didn't sell any Bitcoin at all. They've got a hodl now of 9,704, so very close to 10,000. They'll get to 10,000 in August if they carry on with that strategy. And that hodl value was worth 627 million as at the end of July, when the price was, 64,000. So
think how they're feeling this morning, Anthony.
Sorry?
I say, think how Riot's feeling this morning when they open up their wallet and take a look at the pullback, eh?
Yeah, but I mean, I suppose, that will happen with a lot of these miners. And like you say, the Bitcoin price is, it looks like it's starting a little bit of recovery. So, who knows? I mean, I keep reiterating we're in that sort of position where in previous cycles, the Bitcoin price has tended to rally. And if you think about all the good news story, we talked about all the sort of the bad macro economic indicators of what's going on around the world and what's going around country by country. When you think about those ETFs that were buying all the way through this year, buying tens of thousands of Bitcoin, you'd expect some sort of a rally based on previous cycles just because of that news. And so
hey, I got to ask you too, one question on Riot before we get into Gryphon, Anthony. So we talk about a lot of the statistics here about the fact that they're bringing on the operational hash rate, multiple exahash in a single month. You compare that to essentially turning on a smaller miner, a Gryphon, a SATO, a Soluna, even almost a Hive in a single month. Do you think this is sustainable? I know Jason has said, hey, basically once we get this blueprint, very similar to IREN, we're just going to rinse and repeat, put these buildings up. But that being said, 4 exahash or 5 exahash in a month is considerable amount of machines. Do you think that's sustainable? And do you think we've now hit the point at which these companies are in the groove and it's going to be this type of increase month over month?
Yeah, we saw it happen with CleanSpark earlier this year. They went from 10 to like 16 very, very quickly, and then maintained that, and then now over 20 exahash as well. So Riot, we've been fortunate to actually visit the Riot site there. Looks an amazing site. The work that those people are doing down there to create this, and also the fact that it's total immersion cooling. So the weather shouldn't play as much as an impact for their facilities as it would do for, say, an air-cooled facility in Texas, where the air-cooled may not get the miners down to a temperature, but when you place them in liquid cooled facilities, you can manage that better, and also potentially you've got a longer life for some of these miners. So I think they've had 18 months of probably, when I say poor production updates, not all down to their own doing. I mean, they had the bad weather in December 2022, which affected their immersion facilities at the Rockdale site, and then they had the issue with the the S19 XP miners, a batch of those, around about 4 exahash. So just think about what they've added this month, just just over 4 exahash. It looks like some of those miners at Rockdale have been replaced, and that will continue to happen. But Rockdale's facility's got significantly more capacity, and at the moment, they're at 9.6 exahash, but they've got 14.7 exahash installed there. So, still another 5 exahash to come out of the Rockdale facility. And we've seen the Corsicana pictures. We know what's going to happen there. So building B1, B2 will be completed before the end of the year. That with Rockdale and Kentucky. So in Kentucky, they're going to build out 100 megawatts. They're at 60 at the moment, and they're going to get to 100 megawatts. That will give them more hash rate. And as I say, their end of year target of 36 exahash puts them sort of like effectively behind Marathon Digital in terms of hash rate. If Marathon get to their target by the end of the year, certainly will surpass IREN and CleanSpark's target, which is around 30 and 32 respectively. So I've said all along, right, we'll get there, and at the moment they're proving my prediction right.
Gotcha. Yeah, it'll be interesting to follow that along, but really showing the power of these single sites, as they have Rockdale as well, but the single site construction opportunity for both IREN and Riot at Corsicana is obviously pretty impressive this year. And as you talk about, Bitdeer is really scheduled for next year in terms of their big growth. Now, finally, we've got Gryphon Digital Mining. So they came out just north of 21 Bitcoin is kind of the estimate for the month. They're just shy of 1 exahash. What was interesting about this press release, so Anthony, for me, is towards the end of it, when they look at the growth updates, you talk about Rob being involved in upwards of 25 different further stage, full due diligence type of investigations into business opportunities. So Gryphon originally said their target was 10 this year. Then Rob came on the channel, said realistically maybe 6 is more in the right realm. We still haven't really seen that growth yet. However, it sounds like on the M&A front, Rob and team have been fairly busy, hey?
Yeah, they've been busy, but we haven't seen that reflect in any sort of growth or expected growth for the end of the year. So I think when we had Rob on early in the year, he had a target of 10 exahash, and when we pressed him on that, he said he'd be happy if he got to about 6. And in July's update, we're sort of hovering just under 0.9 exahash. One thing they do, I mean, they are one of the smaller miners, but they tend to mine quite well in terms of they get more out of their machines than some of their peer miners. So again, operating, if we look at the in terms of Bitcoin mine per exahash, they're probably around where Bitfarms are. They're at 24.6. So Bitfarms are on the same level, and Hive just a little bit ahead of both of them. So Gryphon have been like fairly consistent. We've covered them for the majority of this year, and during that period they've sort of been in that top section of miners in terms of production. Their fleet efficiency 28.6, so still better than a number of their peer miners, and it's just a case now of seeing where some of these, these 25 leads, if some of that, what could lead to, because the challenge for all these smaller miners is how they're going to grow with the levels of capital available for them. They have got a small amount of Bitcoin. They've got 21 Bitcoin in the treasury. That's valued at the end of July at about nearly 1.4 million in terms of valuation there. That will have dropped, obviously, today because the Bitcoin price is $10,000 a Bitcoin less. So that's probably closer to maybe 1.2 million in terms of valuation at today's rate. They sold 16.4, so they are using some of their Bitcoin to pay their operational costs and their direct costs. So most of their costs will be around the energy and the hosting fee. From a case of other operational costs, G&A, it's probably quite small because we've highlighted before Gryphon, unlike a number of other miners, they're quite small in terms of staffing. There's only 3 people in there, and you know, they're all arguing about whose turn it is to make a cup of tea. So you know, when you've got that number of staff, you can sort of like manage things better. But we want to see more of these, more updates. I mean, that was quite a reasonable update in terms of the amount of information, but we want to see what these 25 leads have led to. If that down to, say, you know, 4 or 5 that they can take forward or examining at further depth. So hopefully, I think we're getting Rob on this month. When they come out with their numbers come out, we can maybe pose some of them questions to him. And if people in the listening to this now, or followers listening to this now, maybe start thinking about some of those questions they want to ask as well if they're shareholders in this company, and we'll get them put across to Rob on the show when we get him on this one.
Yeah, it's a great reminder, Anthony. We've got Bitfarms on Friday. It looks like Core Scientific maybe on this Thursday as well. And then we've got about 10 or maybe 12 of the miners lined up over the next few weeks to talk about earnings. Now, as we say that, Anthony, Bitcoin has just crept past 55,000 US. So we're continuing to see this recovery. May be indeed a flash crash for the ages here if you were able to pick up shares of miners or Bitcoin this morning on those lows. It'll look like a great trade here in a few weeks' time. But Anthony, we appreciate your thoughts today. Again, you guys stay calm, stick to the course here. We expect volatility. This stuff unfortunately happens in the crypto and Bitcoin sector, but that's why you've got this channel to keep you level-headed and keep you educated. So Anthony, thanks for your time today. I'll give it to you for any closing thoughts. And if not, we'll conclude with a like, a follow, and any comments you guys may have below.
Yeah, I just want to highlight, I've sent an article through to Compass for, believe it's going to be published tomorrow. So that'll be an article that looks at the 2 miners that released their earnings first. That's Riot versus Marathon. And it's an interesting one. I've looked at, you know, in terms of income statement or statement of operations, as they call it now, balance sheet strength, and another number of other metrics to go through as well. So trying to, you know, take you through some of the numbers that aren't readily available, you know, you have to do a little bit more analysis and compare those, and some interesting insights to that. So, and that'll be out tomorrow. So, you know, take time to have a look through that there. If many of you are probably owners of Riot and Marathon stock, I know that I hold both in my portfolio at the moment.
As do I. They're probably pretty glad they didn't have to do their FASB accounting treatment on today or this morning in terms of their fair value of Bitcoin. But Anthony, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for your time. We'll be back here tomorrow. You guys hold strong and let us know what you're doing in the comments below. Take care.